and welcome to the channel. This is the place where we explore behind the curtain and into the real life and history of William Shakespeare to find out what it was like to live in turn of the 17th century England the way that Shakespeare would have lived it. If you like Shakespeare and you like history, then hit that like and subscribe button because we're here every Saturday. William Shakespeare mentions the word Gleek in his plays a total of 4 times, and it's a really weird name, but it refers to a popular card game called Gleek that I'm going to show you how to play right now on That Shakespeare Life. In Midsummer Night's Dream, the character Bottom mentions, I can gleek upon occasion. It doesn't really sound like something you should be proud of being able to do. In fact, to me, it sounds like a sneeze or something you would definitely need a tissue to handle, but it shows up a lot in Shakespeare's plays. At least 4 times Shakespeare uses this word. And if you're not familiar with it, you'll be wondering, what is he talking about? Well, he's actually referring to a popular card game from the 16th century. Shakespeare isn't the only one familiar with this game either, because there's a lot of contemporary playwrights and authors who are mentioning this game. People like John Northbrook in 1577. He wrote, what is a man nowadays if he cannot know how to play at cards, dice, post, cent, Gleek, and other such games? So in John Northbrook's opinion, you're absolutely nobody if you don't know how to play this game. Ben Jonson gets in on the game with his reference to Gleek in the 1616 play called The Devil is an Ass, saying, when you please, sir, I am for thee, penny Gleek, your man. Now, this is a reference to the fact that Gleek is a gambling game. You play for money when you play it. And you also play it in threes. 3 is a big theme, and I'll explain that further as we get into the play. When it comes to learning how to play this game, we know the way the game was played from several period documents, including the Complete Gamester from 1674. There's Witt's Interpreter from 1662, and the example of how this game is supposed to look in play actually comes from an actor named Thomas Green. He is credited as writing down how to play this game in 1599. That is the same year that William Shakespeare built his Globe Theatre in Southwark, if you're looking for a Shakespeare timeline reference there. But he wrote a publication, Thomas Green did, called The City Gallant. Now, this was actually published in 1624, and there's a wild history of how we went from Thomas Green writing it down in 1599 to The City Gallant being published in 1624. And I will link you to the wonderful David Parlett's website. He is where I turn to for all things historic games. He has all kinds of games from in and outside Shakespeare's lifetime. So I'll link you to that below this show note. He has also been a guest on our podcast, That Shakespeare Life. So if you'd like to hear him talk about more 16th century card games, I'll link you to that podcast below as well. But for now, let's dive into how to play the game of Gleek. Here's how you play. So the game is played in a series of rounds. The first round is where you're drawing your cards. So it begins with everybody getting dealt 12 cards each. So this is a game for 3 players, and you're playing with 44 cards because you took the 2s and 3s out of a normal 52 card deck. So you've got the 44 cards left. This game is played in 4 parts. The first is the draw. Once everyone has been dealt their cards, you look at what you have and you decide whether or not you want to trade them out for what's in the pot. You bid for the right to replace your cards, and you're competing with the other players at the table because only one person gets to trade their cards out. And the lowest bid that you can submit is 12 pennies. Now, you can pass and you can say, I'm going to keep the cards that I have and I'm not going to pay to trade my cards out. But if another player wants to pay 12 pennies to trade their cards out, they can, as long as the other player doesn't outbid them. And they can go back and forth. So if one player says, I want to buy the pot, I'm going to pay 12 pennies. And the third player says, no, you don't. I want it. I'll pay 13. Oh, I'll pay 14. No, I'll pay 15. And they go back and forth, raising it 1 penny at a time until somebody gives up and says, okay, you can have it. And then that person pays whatever the highest bid was and trades 7 of the cards from their hand for the 7 cards that are turned up. The trump card that got turned up at the beginning stays, and that card counts as the dealer's first play when we get to the playing round. But before we get there, the second part of this game, once everyone is happy with their hand, is called Vying the Rough. So Vying the Rough is when players place bets as to who holds the best ruff, which is the greatest value of cards in any one suit. Aces count as 11, the court cards count as 10, and the number cards all have whatever is on their face value as their value worth. Now, at the start of the game, a certain amount is agreed upon as the basic stake for the vying the rough phase of this game, which means everybody has to put in a certain amount. Generally, it's 2 pennies. Everybody has to put in 2 pennies. Then it goes in a circle of saying, do you want to vie the rough? If you do, you say, I'll vie the rough, and you raise the stake by either choosing some larger amount of money to say, I think I have the highest rough in my hand. If nobody wants to open the vie, so there's no vying, nobody wants to do that, then everybody just puts in 2 pennies, and the next deal, the stake is automatically 4 pennies. But if anyone does vie, then each player in turn, from the left of whoever opened the vie, can either pass, see, or raise. Raise is actually modern poker terminology. In the 16th century, they would have used the phrase, I'll see and revie. But to pass means that you're folding. You're saying, I've put in my 2 pennies and I'm going to fold. I can't win this. I'm going to back it out. To see is when you're calling for a showdown with the other person. So if you see someone's vie, then let's say I opened the vie at 2p. The next player said, I'll see and rebuy, so I'll raise it to 4p. Well, then the third player can say, well, I'll see your bet by putting in 4p also, just like you did. And now I'm calling for a showdown. And the best hand between the two that are showing down wins. If there's a tie for the best, so you show your cards and you both have the same value, then whoever is the older person wins the take. If everybody's the same age, then you assume the dealer is the youngest person and that the person on the dealer's left is the oldest person. The only exception to these rules are that a Mournival of aces wins hands down. Now, this is a Mournival. Remember, in a 16th century deck of cards, an ace is the one card. It will not have an A on it like your traditional deck of cards or the modern ones that you're used to. So these cards that just have one symbol on them, those are your aces. This is a Mournival of aces, or 4 of the aces at one time. So if you know that you have a Mournival of aces, you'll want to drive the betting up because you're going to win whenever a showdown is there. So that's part 2. After we've shown our rough and we know who has the highest value there, then we go to declaring your Gleeks and Mournivals. So everybody separates out their Gleeks and Mournivals, and only Gleeks and Mournivals that are worth 10 points or more get counted. So this would be your court cards, okay? Your Gleeks will be sets of 3 of the same kind of card. Notice these are different suits, but they're all queens, all jacks. Your kings, your queens, your jacks, and your aces are the only Gleeks and Mournivals you're going to pull out. But everybody pulls out their Gleeks and Mournivals. These Gleeks and Mournivals are worth a certain amount of points, and each player has to pay the other players for whatever they're holding. So if I'm holding a Gleek of aces, for example, I have 3 aces, then every other opponent has to put 4 pennies into the pot. And I'll print you out a list of how many pennies you're supposed to put in for each thing. But essentially, all the players set out their Gleeks and Mournivals, and then you go around paying the pot ever how much you have to for what has been played on the table. Now, once we've done our Gleeks and Mournivals and we've established the pot by paying each other what they're worth, then we go to the 4th step of the game, which is called trick play. So at this point, you still have cards left in your hand because not everything was a Gleek or a Mournival. And remember, the Gleeks and Mournivals only counted if it was over 10. So it was only your court cards. So you should be holding a handful of number cards at this point. So now we're going to play these for tricks. Now, the oldest person leads off. If you're all the same age or you don't know who's oldest, then it's the person to the left of the dealer. The card that was turned up trumps at the start of the play is the dealer's first play. So that's the dealer's card for that round, and the person to the left of them leads off. Now, you have to follow suit if you can, but if you don't have whatever suit was played, then you play whatever you're holding. The trick is taken by the highest card of the suit that led. So if somebody leads a diamond, then the highest diamond gets to take that trick. And you keep going until all the cards have run out. Now, during the trick play of the game, you can earn points different ways during play. Obviously, if you take the trick, you have a certain amount of points that you get for taking the trick. But if you play a 4, 5, or 6, which are each called a titty, a towser, and a tumbler, respectively, then you earn points for playing those particular cards during play. You also get a point value for what's called your honors. So if you play an ace, king, queen, or jack during this round, you get points for playing that card, even if you don't take the trick. So you should have a pen and paper with you as you're playing to keep track of what you've played, so that you can say, well, I played these, and so I get those points. Now, at the end, you count up how many tricks that you have, and you're going to earn 3 points for every trick that you've won, plus the points value for what's called your honor card. So if at any point you played an ace, king, queen, or jack, you get that added to your 3 points per trick. Everybody adds up their points, and then each player has a total. You either win or lose the difference between your total amount of points and the number 22. So in other words, if you count up your points and you earned less than 22 points, then you have to pay the pot 1 penny for every point it takes to get you up to 22. So if you only made 18 points, then you're going to have to pay 4 pennies to the pot. If you go over 22 points, so you've earned more than 22 points, then you actually take from the pot 1 penny for every point in excess of 22. So if you earned 25 points, you're going to take 3 pennies from the pot. And remember, we established the pot earlier in our vying for the rough round. So that's where the pot comes from, and this is how you're using it after you establish it. Now, the significance of the number 22 is because in various manuals that outline how this game is supposed to be played, 22 is 1/3 of the total value of court cards and tricks that you can earn. So the number of points that is possible in this game, 22 is 1/3 of it. So that's their way of trying to make the game fair. One caveat that David Parlett outlines in his instructions for this game is that there's not any instructions in the surviving game manuals for Gleek as to what you're supposed to do if there's money left in the pot after you've counted up your tricks and your points and you've added and taken away, and now there's money still there. So the best thing he recommends is just at the start of play, everybody playing agrees what you're going to do if there's leftovers in the pot. Typically, the leftovers in the pot goes to the dealer, and you just agree to play 3 rounds so that everybody gets to be a dealer and has a chance to get the leftovers. That's probably the fairest way to handle it, but you get to decide how you want to do that with your fellow players. So just make sure that you outline how to do that at the start of play. Now, how many rounds that you play depends on your players too. There's no standard round, unlike some of the other games we've played on that Shakespeare Life, where you play to a certain point value. This game, you just play until your money or snacks run out, I guess, because there's no end point defined. You just play until you've decided you're finished. That can be 1 round, that could be 3 rounds, or 20 rounds. It's totally up to you and your fellow players. The only thing to remember about that is that every time a new round starts, so every time a new dealer gets the deck, the ante goes up by double. So when you're buying for the round, everybody's initial stake doubles each round. So it's 2 pennies the first time, 4 pennies the next time, 8 pennies the time after that. So that probably limits how long you're going to keep doing this as well, because again, money just flows everywhere in this game. So there you go. Now you know how to play this authentic 16th century card game straight from the life of William Shakespeare. If you would like a printable guide to the game of Gleek, including some more history and a printable instruction sheet you can take with you to the table if you're going to be playing this game with friends, then consider joining our DIY history level on Patreon. The DIY history level gives you access to printable guides to games like this one and all of our other DIY history activities from That Shakespeare Life. You can sign up for these at patreon.com/thatshakespearelife. That's it for this week. Thank you for watching. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.